I never thought I'd see the day when a man half my age would sit across from me and explain how to do the job I'd been doing since before he hit puberty. But there I was, at 50 years old, in a beige conference room with those terrible overhead lights, listening to our new CFO, Greg Mason, tell me how automation is the future and how I should consider taking a step back to mentor the next generation. I smiled, nodded, bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. And when it was over, I walked back to my desk, no longer the office with the window and the glass door, and sat at the workstation outside the break room. That's where they put me, right next to the humming vending machine and the microwave that never quite stopped beeping. It was their way of telling me I was finished. I just wasn't fired, not yet, but I knew the drill. I'd seen it happen to others, the older ones who didn't have TikTok, who still printed reports, who asked, "What's Slack?" and got laughed at behind their backs. They didn't push you out the door, they just made the building unbearable. But I wasn't like the others. I had no intention of going quietly. The day they demoted me, they didn't just insult my work, they insulted my entire life. I'd spent 27 years in this company. I had built the entire financial backbone of their expansion. I'd negotiated with banks, smoothed over audits, handled union strikes and embezzlement scandals. And now I was being asked to train a 27-year-old who had a degree in financial innovation and thought Excel formulas were obsolete. His name was Tyler. He wore sneakers with his suits and called me ma'am like he was speaking to his grandma. The first week he shadowed me. The second week he started taking meetings without me. By the third week he'd accidentally changed all the folder permissions and locked me out of the system I'd helped build. I reported it. HR said it was a learning curve and I should be more collaborative. That's when I knew. They were all in on it. Greg, HR, even my old boss Henry, the man who used to call me his right hand. They were easing me out slowly enough that I couldn't claim age discrimination, quietly enough that no one would notice. But I noticed, and I remembered. Every password, every weakness, every client's pain point, every unpaid invoice I'd covered with creative accounting. I started keeping notes, not on the company laptop, of course, on a legal pad I kept in my purse. Old school, analog, untraceable. I noted every system change, every client complaint, every time Tyler missed a deadline or Greg fudged a forecast. I smiled through meetings. I baked banana bread for the office. I played the part of the harmless, aging finance lady. But at night, I was building something else. I reached out to 3 former clients, ones I knew were unhappy. I floated the idea of a new consultancy. I didn't promise anything. I just asked questions. 2 of them bit. I bought a new laptop, paid cash, registered a domain under my niece's name. I called it Whitmore Strategies. Simple, clean, forgettable. I hired a coder on Fiverr to replicate the dashboard we'd built at the company, but sleeker, faster. I rewrote every budgeting template I'd ever used and turned them into packages. I stayed up until 3 a.m. most nights. I drank too much coffee. I lied to my sister about why I missed her daughter's piano recital. But I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. The company thought it had broken me, but it had done the opposite. It had given me purpose, clarity, rage, and I knew how to channel all 3. The first crack came 6 weeks later. A longtime client, a construction firm with 5 major projects, pulled out of their contract. Greg was livid. HR launched a root cause analysis. Tyler said it was probably brand misalignment. I knew the truth. I had coffee with that client 3 days before they canceled. The second crack came a month after that. Payroll was delayed. No one knew why. It said it was a server issue. Finance said it was a vendor delay. But I knew. Because the vendor they were using? I had introduced them to the company 15 years ago, and I still had the contact. 1 phone call, 1 casual, "Hey, don't rush that payment file." And chaos followed. But I didn't gloat. Not yet. I waited, I documented, I smiled. The third crack came when Tyler tried to onboard a major government client and sent the wrong pricing structure. They'd quoted $2.4 million instead of $3.2, a $800,000 gap. Legal scrambled. Greg blamed the intern, but Tyler was the one who signed off. I just happened to have a screenshot. Don't ask how. After that, I knew they were spiraling. Greg started holding closed-door meetings. HR began wellness check-ins. Tyler asked if I'd be willing to take on a more advisory role. I said I'd think about it. I never did. Because by then, Whitmore Strategies had its own office. A shared space downtown, yes, but with a nameplate and a lock and a coffee machine that didn't beep. I had 4 clients, 2 part-time contractors, and a waiting list. But I wasn't done, not even close. I wanted them to beg me back. I wanted to walk into that beige conference room and watch Greg sweat through his overpriced blazer. I wanted Tyler to stammer and offer me flexibility and autonomy. And then I wanted to say no, politely, with a smile, like a lady, but not yet. First, I needed one more piece, one final crack to break the dam. And when it came, I didn't even have to lift a finger. They did it to themselves. All I had to do was wait. 3 months after my demotion, the office started to rot from the inside. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was a slow, almost imperceptible decay, like termites chewing through the foundation of a grand house. And I was the one, feeding them, one splinter at a time. On the surface, I was still the same Diana. Smiling, helpful, predictable. I brought donuts every Friday. I nodded along in meetings. I even complimented Tyler's terrible slide decks. But underneath that, calm, I was sharpening knives. The beauty of being underestimated is that people forget you exist. Tyler stopped CCing me on key emails. Greg rarely asked for my input unless there was a fire to put out. Even HR stopped pretending to care about my transition journey. Perfect. While they were busy patting themselves on the back for their modernization efforts, I was mapping out every vulnerability they couldn't see coming. My private consultancy, Whitmore Strategies, had gained 2 more clients, one of them a subcontractor who used to be exclusive with my old firm. All it took was one quiet dinner, a few facts about how much they were being overbilled, and a soft pitch for a more personalized experience. They signed within 48 hours. I wasn't even trying that hard anymore. Word was spreading. Diana Whitmore had something better. Meanwhile, back at the office, Tyler was struggling. He didn't know it yet, but I'd made sure his spreadsheet. Templates had formulas that didn't auto-update properly. Just a slight miscalculation on quarterly projections. Enough to raise eyebrows, not alarms. When the numbers didn't match in Greg's investor deck, panic trickled in. I watched Tyler sweat through a meeting as Greg questioned his data hygiene. I offered to help fix it, and Tyler, desperate, accepted. I spent 2 nights cleaning those sheets, and in the process, duplicated every financial IKEA file the company had. Then I encrypted them and sent them to my personal drive, just in case. I wasn't planning blackmail. Yet. But I wanted leverage. Insurance. The kind of material that, in the right hands, could cause a boardroom massacre. Greg, on the other hand, had bigger issues. He was pushing for a flashy merger with a tech-forward engineering firm. Shiny slides, big promises, buzzwords like synergy and disruption. But what he didn't realize was that this firm had a skeleton crew of unpaid interns and a lawsuit in the pipeline. How did I know? Because one of the interns used to be my neighbor's kid. And over brunch, he spilled everything. I dropped an anonymous tip to our company's legal department. Nothing major. Just a hint that they might want to run another due diligence pass. 2 weeks later, the merger talks stalled. Greg blamed market volatility. I called it divine intervention. That week, I wore red to work. First time in years. People noticed. Tyler joked, "Someone's feeling bold." I smiled and said, "Just getting warmed up?" He didn't get it. Of course not. Children rarely understand warning signs. Meanwhile, I was feeding subtle narratives through the grapevine. I made sure our receptionist overheard me mention odd discrepancies in vendor payments. I let the junior analyst know how much more accurate our reporting used to be before the system revamp. Nothing direct, just whispers, seeds. And the office, as it always does, did the rest. Rumors began to sprout like weeds. Tyler was in over his head. Greg was gambling too much. Diana? Too smart to be stuck by the vending machine. I didn't fan the flames. I just lit the match and walked away. One morning, Tyler approached me nervously. "Hey, do you still have that vendor contact for Iron Ridge materials?" I blinked. That was one of our top suppliers. "Why?" I asked. "Their payments bounced. Twice. Greg wants a backup, but the files are missing." Of course they were. I had them. "I'll check," I said calmly. I gave him a sanitized version. Enough to get by, enough to make it clear that without me, things would collapse. And they were. Slowly. Beautifully. The company had lost 3 mid-tier clients. 2 departments were merging to cut costs. Greg's reputation was slipping with the board. Tyler was skipping lunch and taking calls in the stairwell. HR looked like they were trying not to blink too hard. And me? I was thriving. My days were split between pretending to be invisible at the company and building something real outside it. Whitmore Strategies now had a waiting list. I was planning to rent a proper office, hire full-time staff, maybe even offer mentorship. The real kind, not the lip service Greg loved to spout. But I wasn't ready to leave yet. Not until I delivered. The final blow. Not until they asked me to stay. And I could laugh in their faces. That moment came sooner than I expected. One Friday afternoon, Greg called me into his office. His tie was crooked. His smile forced. "Diana," he began, "I just want to say we've noticed the extra hours, the support, the stability you bring." I said nothing. "There's been talk of creating a new role, something more strategic. Advisory, perhaps, with a bump in pay." I tilted my head. "After demoting me?" He chuckled awkwardly. "You know how these transitions go. We didn't realize how much institutional knowledge you had." "Ah," I said. "And now that things are falling apart, you realize the walls had a foundation." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I smiled. "Tell me more about this new role." He launched into buzzwords: cross-functional oversight, long-term, forecasting, internal compliance liaison. All smoke, no substance. "I'll consider it," I said, standing up, "but I'll need the weekend." He beamed. "Of course. Take your time." I walked out of that office knowing exactly what I'd do. I wasn't going to take their fake promotion. I was going to take their clients, their vendors, their future. And when I was done, I'd leave behind only ashes and archived emails. They thought they were offering me a lifeline, but I was already sailing away, on a yacht I built from the pieces they threw out. The weekend Greg gave me to consider his new role offer was the same weekend I signed a 6-month lease on a private office suite for Whitmore Strategies. I didn't need to think about it. I had already made my decision. What I needed was time to sharpen my blade. The trap was almost ready. All I had to do now was spring it. On Monday morning, I walked into the office like I always did, dressed in gray slacks, a soft pink blouse, nothing too bold. I brought muffins. Everyone smiled. Greg gave me a hopeful nod from the hallway. Tyler didn't make eye contact. The mood was shifting. People were sensing things. It's funny how quickly the illusion of power can evaporate. That afternoon, I sent Greg an email, polite, professional, to the point. I thanked him for the opportunity and respectfully declined. At this stage of my career, I wrote, I'm exploring ventures that allow for more autonomy and direct client impact. No mention of Whitmore Strategies. Not yet. I wanted them to find out the hard way. The response came 30 minutes later. A calendar invite for a brief sync with Greg, HR, and, surprise, the company's general counsel. I laughed. So that's how it was going to be. A last-ditch attempt to keep me inside the walls, or maybe a veiled threat to scare me silent. Either way, I showed up. I brought a notepad, took the seat at the end of the conference table, the one they used to give me when I was lead strategist. Greg opened the meeting with his usual, over-rehearsed charm. Diana, we're concerned about some of the shifts we've seen lately. Your reduced engagement, the vendor changes, and now your decision to turn down an executive role. We just want to make sure everything is okay. I smiled. Everything's fine. I'm just doing my job. HR chimed in. There have also been questions around access to certain archived financial documents. We'd like to understand the context. Of course, I said. As you know, I was locked out of several systems. I made notes on what I needed to complete my tasks. All standard documentation. They shifted uncomfortably. Legal cleared. His throat. If there's a conflict of interest, or any non-compete risk, are you asking if I've started my own firm? I said it with such casual precision that all three of them froze. Because I have. Greg's eyes twitched. Excuse me? It's called Whitmore Strategies, registered under my niece but run by me. We offer streamlined financial ops and vendor mediation. Small team, discreet, efficient. HR stammered. That's not against policy, I cut in. I reviewed my employment contract. There's no non-compete clause, no IP restrictions. Everything I've built for my firm is original. I haven't taken a single client from here. Yet. Greg's jaw tightened. Why now? Because I spent 27 years building your empire, I said, calm as glass, only to be discarded for children in sneakers and buzzwords. I decided I'd rather spend the next 10 building something that respects my value. The silence was glorious. I stood up. Unless you have a formal claim, I'll get back to work. And just like that, I walked out. But not before sliding a copy of Whitmore Strategies' business card across the table. A reminder, a warning, a declaration. Over the next 2 weeks, the unraveling accelerated. Clients began to ask questions. 2 requested third-party audits of their current service fees. 1 canceled a renewal contract without explanation. Internally, panic was setting in. Tyler was working weekends. Greg started arriving before 8 a.m., a first. HR held morale town halls and passed around anonymous surveys. I didn't bother answering. I was already gone, just not physically. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Amanda, a senior procurement officer from C&H Builders, one of our largest accounts, rang my personal number. She sounded tired. Frustrated. Diana, we need help. Our numbers haven't balanced for 2 quarters, and no one at your firm can give me a straight answer. Greg said you're still with the company. Is that true? Officially, yes, I said, but I also run a consultancy now, one that can give you a straight answer. She didn't hesitate. Can we set a meeting? That was it. The moment I knew the shift was irreversible. 1 client jumping ship is an incident. 2 is a trend. 3 is a landslide. Within 10 days, C&H signed a retainer with Whitmore Strategies. So did Weston Utilities and a mid-sized supplier that had once said they'd never leave my old company. People don't leave companies. They leave incompetence. They leave disrespect. They leave when the person they trusted is no longer there, until they find her again. I didn't gloat publicly. No press releases, no LinkedIn humble brags. I let the work speak. Let the silence from my old desk grow louder. Then, one morning, I arrived to find my security badge deactivated. No warning, no email, just a red light, and a locked door. Greg's cowardice, I thought. He couldn't face me, so he cut the cord like a thief in the night. I stood there for a moment, in the lobby I had helped design, the floor plan I'd approved, the lighting layout I'd optimized for energy tax credits. Then I turned around and walked out. I never looked back. 2 hours later, I sent a formal resignation letter. Attached to it were 3 files, a spreadsheet detailing cost misallocations under Tyler's oversight, a list of client concerns forwarded anonymously to legal, and a link to Whitmore Strategies' onboarding portal, just for fun. The subject? Line read, exit interview, effective immediately. I didn't need their severance. I didn't want their reference. I wanted them to sit in the mess they created and realize who cleaned it for the last 27 years. And I wanted to make sure they never got the chance to do it to anyone else again. Because revenge for me was never about screaming. It was about silence, strategy, patience. And when the final piece clicks into place, watching the empire they stole from me collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. They demoted me at 50. So I built my future out of the scraps they threw away. And now, I was just getting started. 2 weeks after I walked away from the building I once called home, The calls started coming in, not from clients, but from former colleagues. Whispers of chaos, late invoices, systems down, vendors demanding payment up front. Tyler had been promoted to interim head of finance, and with that came a spotlight far too bright for someone who had built his career hiding behind PowerPoint slides and Greg's approval. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back in the leather chair inside my new office, sipping tea while watching the autumn wind whip leaves against the glass. The silence was blissful. No fluorescent lights, no passive-aggressive memos. Just me, my work, and a future I had built from ashes. Whitmore Strategies had grown fast. Faster than I anticipated. We had 6 full-time staff now. 2 of them were people my old company had laid off during restructuring. One of them, Maria, had been the only one who warned me months ago. She'd whispered at the printer, "They're planning something. Watch your back." I didn't forget. I never do. I rewarded loyalty the way others rewarded flattery. Maria now ran my client onboarding team, and she was thriving. The real victory wasn't that I was winning. It was that I was building something better, cleaner, smarter, kinder. But I wasn't done with the past. Not yet. I had one last nail to drive in. I just needed the perfect hammer. It came in the form of an internal leak. A flash drive. No name, no return address. Just a padded envelope mailed to my new office with a note. "I figured you'd know what to do." On it, financial projections, falsified reports, and, most deliciously, a presentation draft. From Greg to the board, claiming a 12% increase in quarterly growth, while hiding the fact that 5 of their top clients had dropped off the books. I reviewed it 3 times. Then I smiled. They were lying. To the board, to investors, possibly even to the government. And now, I had proof. But I didn't go to the media. That's too noisy, too dramatic. I chose something quieter, but far more devastating. I sent an anonymous package to the company's external auditor, just enough to raise flags, just enough to trigger an inquiry. I knew the timing. Mid-Q4 would be brutal. Audits during the holidays? Everyone hates them. And when auditors dig, they find. Within days, I heard back from Amanda at C&H Builders. "What's going on over there?" she asked. "They just canceled 2 projects out of nowhere." "Cash flow issues," I replied casually. "You're better off with us." "Already ahead of you," she said. "We're moving everything over." Just like that, another domino fell. From what I was hearing through back channels, Greg was panicking. Tyler was on medical leave, which I assumed meant a nervous breakdown. HR had gone silent. No newsletters, no updates, no morale surveys. The firm was bleeding and no one knew where to find the tourniquet. I knew. Because I was the one who slit the artery. One evening as I closed my laptop, I saw a message on my personal phone. Unknown number. The message was short. "You were right? Can we talk?" I recognized the area code. It was Henry, my old boss. The man who had once called me indispensable before stepping aside and letting Greg take over. The same Henry who ghosted me when I was demoted. I let the message sit for 2 days. Then I replied, "You know where to find me." He showed up that Friday. Same gray hair, but more of it now. Less styled, more panicked. He brought coffee, which I didn't touch. "Diana," he said, his voice thin, "we made a mistake." "You think?" I said, folding my arms. "I knew it the day Greg pushed you out," he admitted, "but I didn't think it would go this far." "No." I said, "You didn't think at all. You were too busy cashing in your stock options." He winced. "We need help." "You need a miracle," I corrected. "And I'm fresh out." "The board is replacing Greg," he said quietly. "They're looking for someone to stabilize the mess, someone with credibility, history, authority." "Let me guess," I said. "You told them my name." He nodded. "They're willing to offer full autonomy, CEO title, reinstatement package, equity." I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the skyline I now had a stake in. You think I want to clean up your mess? I said. I don't. I spent years cleaning for you. I did it quietly, efficiently. And when I asked for recognition, you handed me a pink slip wrapped in a smile. I know, he whispered. Then why are you here? I asked. Because the company's going to die, Diana, and without you, it'll happen fast. I turned to face him. Let it. His face dropped. I softened, just a little. I built something better, Henry. Something I own. Something I control. Why would I ever go back? Because you're better than revenge. No, I said. I'm precisely revenge, just not the kind that screams. I'm the kind that signs the check that buys your competitors out from under you. He left quietly. No rebuttals, no second offers. And as he did, I felt it. Closure. The empire that discarded me was crumbling. And I hadn't even lifted a sword. I just walked away and let their arrogance do the damage. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, called Maria into the office, and said, "Let's talk expansion." She smiled. "Domestic or international?" "Both," I said. "Let's make sure the whole industry knows. I didn't just survive. I took over." 3 months after Henry walked out of my office, the headlines finally caught up to the truth. Regional construction giant under fire for financial misconduct. CFO resigns amidst client exodus. Industry veteran Diana Whitmore launches disruptive financial consultancy. That last one made me laugh. Disruptive? I wasn't trying to disrupt anything. I was simply reclaiming what was mine: respect, control, and peace. But if my peace happened to look like their downfall, well, that wasn't my fault. The company, my former company, was in freefall. Greg had resigned for personal reasons. Tyler never came back from medical leave. HR leadership had turned over twice. The board installed a temporary CEO, but it was too late. The rot had gone too deep. Clients kept leaving. Vendors raised prices. The press was circling like sharks. And I was flourishing. Whitmore Strategies had doubled in size. We had an office in Boston now. Another opening in Austin. Our waitlist had waitlists. I was speaking at conferences, not about revenge. I'd never utter the word, but about resilience, about women in leadership, about building after betrayal. And yes, I was watching. Always watching. Not to gloat, not to sneer, but to remember. Because I never wanted to forget what they did to me. I never wanted to soften the edge that kept me sharp. Then one morning, as I was reviewing our Q1 projections, Maria walked in, holding a thick envelope. "From corporate counsel," she said. "Not ours, theirs." I took it slowly. Inside, a letter from the board's legal team. Formal, polite, desperate. They were dissolving the company, selling off assets, settling debts, and they wanted to know if I was interested in acquiring their financial operations software, the very system I had helped build. "They're selling us back your own work," Maria said, amused. "Do we buy it?" I looked at the price, dirt cheap, fire sale rates. "We don't just buy it," I said. "We absorb it. We bury the name, and we make sure no one remembers they existed." She smiled. "Poetic." No, it was surgical, precise. Poetic implies beauty. This was about erasure. That weekend, I signed the acquisition papers. Quietly, no press release, no social media announcement. I didn't need applause. I had my victory the moment they asked me to save what they destroyed. I made sure every document, every policy, every trace of the old firm was folded into our systems, but the brand itself? Gone. Wiped, archived, and forgotten. I didn't burn bridges. I bought them. Then I tore them down. Over the next few months, people began to forget the old firm. Clients stopped mentioning them. Vendors referred to us exclusively. Even former employees, the ones who had once laughed behind my back, started submitting resumes. Some I hired. Others I ignored. I had no interest in revenge for sport. I only struck when it mattered. The rest? I left to their own silence. One evening, I found myself alone in my office. The city lights blinked like a quiet applause. I opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and sat back in the chair that once felt too big. before I realized it had always been mine. A message pinged on my phone. Unknown number. I opened it. You probably don't remember me, but you trained me on invoice audits back in 2014. Just wanted to say thanks. You taught me more in 6 months than my manager has in 5 years. Glad to see you thriving. I did remember her. Her name was Kelsey. She used to take notes with different color pens and asked smart questions even when no one else did. I replied, "Thank you, Kelsey. Keep asking the smart questions." I stared at the message for a while. It reminded me why I'd fought so hard. Not just to prove them wrong, though that part felt good, but to prove that integrity, patience, and grit still had a place in this world. I had been pushed down, talked over, cast aside, and I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't sue. I rebuilt. Silently. Ruthlessly. And now I stood at the helm of something I owned. No board, no boys' club, just results. People like Greg and Tyler will always exist. Men who mistake confidence for competence, who ride buzzwords like lifeboats and throw women overboard to stay afloat. But sometimes, just sometimes, the women swim back, not to join the ship, but to sink it. I turned off the lights, walked to the elevator, and as the doors closed, I caught my reflection. No longer the tired woman from the break room. No longer the scapegoat. No longer forgotten. I was Diana Whitmore, the name they tried to erase, the mind they tried to suppress, the woman who made them irrelevant. They demoted me at 50. Now I run the game.